I'm Richard Taylor and I'm here at South Cambridgeshire District Council's headquarters for the second public meeting of the Greater Cambridge City Deal Board. I'm here because I'm following the money and I'm following the power. The three councillors who are the voting members of the board will get to decide how about £100 million of public money, central government grant to the Greater Cambridge area will be spent. That's at least the amount of money they'll be deciding how to spend. They could be spending up to £1 billion of public money on my city in Cambridge.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry we're a little late, but at least we're making sure that the building's fully occupied by not turning the others out until 2:05. So I'm just getting my agenda. Apologies. Have we any apologies?
No, Chairman, no apologies, thank you.
I don't think I need to go around the table, need I? I think everybody knows everybody's going to. Yes. Are you all right, Claire? Do you know everybody?
I can read the name badges of those I don't know. Graham, you were the last one.
Notes of the previous meeting. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Do we agree they're a correct record?
Yeah.
Yep. Number 3, reports and recommendations from the Joint Assembly. Since I don't think they've met yet, this is going to be a standing item to make sure that it's on every agenda, isn't it? Number 4, feedback from stakeholder briefings, a verbal update. Who's going to start? Lewis?
The first one was about 9 o'clock in the morning with transport, development, business park and companies on I think it was the 2nd of December, and it was a good discussion. I think the key issues that came up were the discussion about, well, how does the investment in the city deal link to public transport, and the links to the request that we've had for the three of us to meet up with Stagecoach to have a discussion there. And also it just highlighted some of the importance of links from, say, the West Cambridge and the university site around to both the Biomed site in the south and also the science park in the north. So it did emphasise the importance of those orbital transport links as well as the wider discussion. But it's essentially business interests in Cambridge and also places out towards Mayfair and so on. So it was a useful discussion. About 30 people were there.
Yep. Steve, have you done it, or was it Ian?
No, my first one this evening, that's Ian, has been the same ones that either of you two had, so you'll be able to read us anyway.
We've got one more still.
Yes, and the Guildford Sequel, so it's with Cambridge, the Residents Association, other groups from Cambridge. So it's me and Steve. And if Graham's more advice.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we had the one at the housing centre as well. Yeah. Ian led all that. With the businesses, that was quite good. Again, I think it was interesting that so many people in the business had turned up. Questions interesting because the questions were completely different from the ones we got on Monday, which is good. And then Monday night we had a meeting here from the parish councils. Apart from one person who said that we shouldn't be creating any more jobs because that meant we've got to build more houses, and if we built more houses we'd have to create more jobs, so there was no point in doing any of it basically, which was a theory, wasn't it? Apart from that, I think that there was some interesting questions. The parishes, I can't think of anything that was specific. an impact.
There were demands for improved transport infrastructure more generally across the county, particularly towards the south of the county, of 1307 in particular, although they were obviously very localised issues coming from parish councillors, as you'd expect, I suppose. And lots of interest in the skills agenda as well, which was an interesting part of the discussion as well.
A lot about apprenticeships.
And we concluded by talking about the 1,000 additional affordable homes on rural exception sites, and asked parishes to engage with us directly if they had sites or areas that they wanted to explore. And there was some interest for that, and we've given the parish councils the contacts of our officers here who are taking that project forward.
Chair, will we get the summary of some of the key issues when we get together with the city deal discussion about the region infrastructure?
Certainly the parish one was minuted. I don't know if the other three are. But
yeah, if I may chair, the others, the Office of County Clinton will be able to council assess put together a list of key issues that are.
So when will we put those reports?
Well, Debbie's putting that together.
Yeah, it should be a couple of weeks or so until we put it all together, because as I say, after each session, there'll be key issues to pick up, so it's not putting that all together. It's tonight as well.
And what's the plan? Are you going to email them out to members, or will we wait till the next meeting, or what?
To have members preferring this, I think probably the sooner we get it out there, the better actually, so we will be certainly be fine to email the first members will check.
And also for the assembly.
Anything else from Stephen? Cambridge Promotion Agency, item number 5.
I can join you at the table, so it's easier to speak from here. How long would you like? 5 minutes max, I assumed? And if there are any questions, so we go for that. So thank you for having me here today. I just want to talk through some things which I think are commonly agreed, but let me just check those by looking around the room. First of all, that the attraction of entrepreneurs and business growth and funds is competitive in the world these days. Cambridge is not the only place trying to get the best businesses in. Second is that Cambridge needs to win the right sort of growth, so quality, not quantity. We need to be very careful about managing the infrastructure, as we know, and that we currently have more inquiries about coming to visit Cambridge and coming to set up business in Cambridge than we can sensibly handle. And I think that's the point at which we realised that we were not handling everything, certainly as far as I was concerned, in the best possible way. We were being somewhat inconsistent. We were not having material going into MedCity brochures and the rest of it. So there is some improvement that we could make in the way that we're handling things at the moment. So I think there's been general agreement that we would do better if we were more joined up. So if I just pause there, has anybody got any disagreement with what I've said so far? Being joined up is probably a good thing.
Can I just ask, I'm sorry, I'm not going to disagree with that statement whatsoever, but I'm not aware actually of the Cambridge Promotion Agency, who you are or how you're funding that. Are you part of Cambridge City Council, or are you an independent organisation? I'm just sorry.
I'll come on to that. So,
Sorry, my fault, I'm sorry. Yes.
a very good point, and I will come on to that. So it's just really that is the context of why I'm here at all today. To go on to who I am, my name is Claire Ruskin. I'm born and bred in Cambridge. Forebears have been here forever and ever. I'm very passionate about Cambridge being a very good part of the world. Cambridge Greater region, the LEP region in particular, so very much in tune with what Neil is doing in the LEP region. It needs to compete for its place in the world. We're now up against Boston and Shanghai more than we're up against Manchester and Sheffield. So quite keen that we do keep that focus in mind and the fact that we are world entering rather than just up against Sheffield. Cambridge Network is an organisation that is relevant to this for a number of reasons that I'll come on to. And I am CEO of Cambridge Network, and Cambridge Network represents about 1,500 businesses in the region, so much broader than Cambridge as it happens, but it was set up about 15 years ago to represent Cambridge businesses with the universities that we have around here and to try and get them raising the game for each other and with each other, so that we do come to be in the position that we're in now, with 15 businesses have gone over the $1 billion valuation at some point or other from zero startup. So a successful business environment, which I've taken quite a long part in. So I've been around actually since the Cambridge cluster started historically, and have been setting up spin-outs, working for the consultancies, doing technical roles. So I'm an electronics engineer by background, which you should now all forget because it's irrelevant to anything going forward. But it gives me a certain credibility in the business world. So if we generally agree that we need to join up, then I'm quite happy to get that going, just by putting some more effort in from the Cambridge Network side, because I know we're all resource constrained. I know that if I look around the table, you'll all say, yes, we all do some of this, but actually I know that it's very difficult to get more resource into doing anything at the moment. So suggestion is that I take it up as a new role within the Cambridge Network for reasons that I can come on to, and find a way to coordinate and share the load more successfully, more effectively, and probably more efficiently if we can do something slightly different to what we're doing at the moment. I don't think there's anything bad going on at the moment, there's just not as much good going on as we could do with the same level of resource that we've got. What we need to do really is provide some consistent materials and some consistent gateway for people who do ring up probably everyone in this room and another 30 people outside this room. I was just counting up yesterday again the number of people I would need to invite to a meeting if I were to invite all the people that had people ringing them up saying, can we come and bring 5 people from Leuven to Cambridge next week? We will get that all the time, and it's actually quite a big drain of energy and resource as we go through. So inevitably funding and resource are a bit of a challenge, but we've got the wherewithal to kickstart this and to get something going, and even if we just had a very short blip of activity, I think it would help in the process going forward. So I'm not suggesting that we soak up a huge amount of funding and resource and try and boil the ocean, just that we get a kickstart going, and therefore get us into a better position as we look forward, because we're competing with people that are very heavily funded, and it's very attractive to say let's get several people doing this and try and get more funding in, but at the moment we haven't been given any funding from anywhere in particular, so we're just trying to use our own resource to get this started. The opportunity, I think, is to be the real engine for growth, both for the region, with quite big ripples out, jobs for everybody in this greater region, and then for that to have an impact on the UK as well. So I'm very keen that we do think of it as a UK growth engine rather than just selfishly for a very small environment. That said, we'll only get that growth if we actually brand it fairly carefully, and Cambridge is undoubtedly the brand for the thing that we're talking about that will compete with Boston and Shanghai rather than with Sheffield and Milton Keynes. So I think we have to be quite realistic about that branding and that approach. That's really all I want to set as context. I won't go into any details unless anybody wants me to, but the very first things we need to do are actually to get the LEP and UKTI particularly to make sure that we've got their point of view absolutely clear. So far the UKTI, I know, think that Cambridge is pretty appalling at responding to anything, and our reputation is very bad at the moment, so they would rather take things to Sheffield than bring them to Cambridge because they don't think we respond very well. And that's my fault as much as anybody else's fault, because we're simply overloaded and don't do it very effectively. So getting the LEP point of view, getting the UKTI point of view aligned with what we're trying to do is very important, and coming to this room as well is extremely important, because I know that you do all take part in a lot of activities that do help this. The idea is to get people sensibly welcomed, or frankly triaged to the point where if they are going to waste all of our time, there's no point us spending much time seeing them. So we'll give people an hour maybe, but not a day of everybody's time. But the important visitors who might bring a quality prospect into the region, we do need to treat very seriously, and we need to be able to say at relatively short notice, can you come and meet these people who are coming in? And we treat them seriously. We need better material, because there are all sorts of brochures going out all around the world, from MedCity, from Tech City, from Innovate UK, from UKTI, all around the world, which do not include Cambridge material, because, as I say, UKTI and other agencies don't rate us very highly They don't think we need help. They think we're arrogant, complacent, and all those other words that we don't like being used. But that arguably is true because we have such a plethora of opportunity. So looking forward, we need to be smarter, we need to be better, and I think there is a way that we can do that. If you happen to have funding, resources, practical help, ability to print brochures for us, anything like that, that would of course be welcome. But I think the starting step has to be that we'll do something with your enthusiasm and support and trust rather than asking for money.
Well, I just think it's a really welcome initiative, and obviously private sector led, it has a lot of logic because there's the networks and there's the knowledge of which sectors are the key sectors for the future of the city. So as you point out, Claire, we're not sort of cash rich ourselves, but I think there are ways that we could look to assist that. And whilst clearly Cambridge is the brand internationally, I think Greater Cambridge, in terms of the area, is the area for growth where effectively the jobs, a lot of the new jobs are being created in the science park. I mean, we've had discussions about whether the science park should be in Cambridge, and South Cambridge is very resistant, and obviously it's quite an important part of South Cambridge's econ role. So I think it's just, I think that the principal message is we want to see how we can help. And we want to align it with the city deal and what may come there. We will continue to have a dialogue also with government about what opportunities there might be, and there are resources that we put in. We've got a whole list of people who get, as you say, contacted if there are inquiries, and it makes sense to actually have that integrated and for there to be a joining up between the things like the county's economic development activity and different inputs that the district councils make.
Jeremy, then Neil.
Well, I also think it's a good idea. We're plagued by high-level tourists, and it's really hard sometimes to know who's worth investing time in. I mean, I've heard very similar things from Cambridge Ahead. Presumably you're talking with them.
Yes, so David Cleaveley is kind of the common point, but I've ended up being the implementation path of obvious choice, so that is partly because I'm very passionate about it, but partly because as Cambridge Network we actually have a way of making it sustainable if we can kickstart it well enough to make it work. So Cambridge Ahead will put a bit of funding in. To be honest, it's slightly more in their interests than Cambridge Network interests because they are the developers and the building people. We tend to be high-tech firms in Cambridge Network, so, but we are well aligned.
Nick?
Thank you very much. Just to follow the theme, we certainly from a LEP perspective welcome this. It's been a long-standing debate we've collectively had about how do we fill the missing link, really. Again, from my perspective, having run the equivalent body in Peterborough for 4 years, the private sector influence does make a bit of a difference when talking to business. That's certainly a finding we found there. And again, just to reflect a wider point around inquiries coming into the area, we see the UK trade and investment inquiries when they come in first through the memorandum we have with them. It's fair to say 4 out of 5, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 inquiries come in for a very, very specific part of Cambridge. It is literally the science parks and the area around the station. And again, marshalling and ensuring we facilitate the ones we want is absolutely critical. And actually having a promotional agency there to do the right bits is also very helpful in managing the bits you don't do. So the good side and the side. Again, in terms of the city growth, it's in the right aspects. It's very important to get this in place and we fully support the work in the
You're happy with that?
Yep.
Yeah.
I didn't ask for very much, so you agree that asking for your trust and support to get going is the starting point.
Just one, I mean, within the work streams that we've identified, I think Andrew Lim sort of listed them. We've obviously got we've got that thread of promotion of Cambridge, and it's partly the communication agenda for us as well. And I think that's, we'll have to just have a look at what resource there is within that, and how that links to communicating both the key issues that are opportunities, but also how we're addressing the challenges. So that clearly people who are looking to invest have got questions, and some of those questions aren't easy.
No, they're not, no. And we will need to work together to get the right answers. I think that's slightly simpler when we know what the question is. Getting the answer is easier than sifting out the good from the less good. So the qualifying range is quite tricky, and I think putting all of our experience together, I know I get a lot of people who are really just business tourists and not likely to invest. We'll be in touch. Thank you.
Anything else? No. Are we going to have a report at a future meeting or something like that, or what are we going to do?
I'd be very pleased to come back and say, right, we're now started, now we do need some resource to help keep this going, but I think if we can keep it very low key and just make it work, then that's going to be a start. So I will come back at any point, possibly.
Is that okay with everybody? Yeah. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry I didn't introduce you. Sorry, Steve, I didn't realise. But
We've met once, but it was a long time ago, I think. Yes.
thank you for that. General programme? I'm told Graham's going to do it.
That's right. Thank you, Chairman. I'll be brief in the introductions. I'm sure that members of the board will have read the papers, but essentially this is largely an information item, just to set down some of the processes in relation to the infrastructure programme, and I will take those items forward. So, Section 3 sets down a bit more detail on the work we're doing at the moment that ultimately will lead to a board decision on our prioritised programme of work. So we're currently working with consultants, Cambridge Econometrics, LSQW. We've had a near final meeting with them. Excuse me, we've got another meeting coming up at the end of this week or early next week. Hopefully we'll conclude their work, and that is to put together a tool for us to prioritise the schemes for members of this board to consider the priority order for investment for the first 5 years at the end of January. So it's a tool which is trying to assess ways of looking at the relative economic benefits of different schemes, so decisions can be taken that will most likely hit the requirements that government sets in the city deal for economic growth as a result of the investment. So that work is ongoing and has nearly concluded. Section 4 of the report just sets down, again for information for this board, the typical process that schemes will go through as they are developed. And really the purpose of this, I suppose, to a certain extent, is a little bit of expectation management, in the sense that once the decision is taken in January for the schemes to go forward and the City Deal money starts flowing at the beginning of April of next year, there will be a period of time, quite a significant period of time in relation to some schemes, until things actually start to appear on the ground. And so whilst we understand that members' desire is to get works going as soon as possible, certainly the larger schemes, as the table in section 3 of the report sets down, could take 2 or more years to actually develop and start to implement. So there will be a time lag before some of those bigger schemes come through, and clearly part of that is the essential processes of consultation, scheme development and design that need to be gone through properly and thoroughly to make sure that we get the right scheme. So that part of the report really just gives members an idea of how the processes will be followed through. Moving on to the section 4, 3 and onwards, we just set down typically, again for information, the level of typical level of costing that will go into developing these schemes, but more particularly setting down for you the assumption that we're working to as officers, that all of the development costs, and that includes consultation and community engagement, will be part of the capital cost of the scheme. So the City Deal funding, the total of £500 million, is all capital, and so our assumption is that we will be using that capital to fund, as we normally do with schemes of this nature, the development costs, which that's all wrapped into the typical cost of a scheme. It's actually included in our indicative costings for each of the schemes that we put forward, but it's just to make sure that members of this board are aware that that is the process we plan to go through. Then the final part of the The final part of the paper really, again, just looking forward, says that ideally, once we have, as a board, taken the decision as to which schemes to proceed, we would like to get on straight away and then start doing the technical work to develop those schemes. That will be in advance of the money actually coming into our bank account. And so at the time, but this is just to give you an indication of how we plan to move things forward, at the time we would be asking for your agreement to start spending that money in advance of the funding actually arriving with us. If we don't do that, then it will just add in extra delay in terms of the schemes being delivered. So from the County Council's point of view, we can manage that in the short term. We will seek formal confirmation that you're comfortable at the time with that process. The final part of the paper just sets down, again for information, the fact that as we move these schemes forward, we will need to, across the three authorities, increase to a certain extent the level of staffing on the capital side. The principle that we want to work to ideally is that we will share resources as much as possible to minimise the amount of additional resource we need to take on, but with a substantial increase in the size of our capital programme, then there is likely to be some additional staffing needed. We will seek to minimise that. We will set down a process properly for how any time is chargeable only to City. So time that is used on City Deal schemes, only that time is charged to City Deal, that will be fully auditable. And that's the normal way that we work. But again, just setting down for your understanding as to what we will be bringing forward to you at a later date. So it's really, as I say, just largely an information paper to set down those processes. Chairman.
Right, thank you. So we've got first Jeremy and then Lewis.
Right, at this stage, the bit I'm most concerned about is the period between now and the meeting in January when we make preliminary decisions. How much time will we have between receiving papers and proposals that our officers and our consultants can look at so that we can draw our own conclusions between getting the papers and the meeting when we need to make decisions?
Whose question is that? I mean, is that Graham or is that us as...
The reason I was looking at the table, I was actually looking at the other grade in terms of the sort of formal democratic timescales. In terms of, as a general point, Jeremy, we certainly anticipate having, if you like, the technical work for the prioritisation exercise to be undertaken by the end of the calendar year. In fact, we have to, in order to meet the democratic timescales that the Graham Watts will have to work to. And so we would want to share that information as soon as we can. I mean, I think what I want to just make clear though is, for when the prioritisation decision is actually taken, there will not be a large amount of information. So none of the schemes on the list are actually developed schemes. We don't have options for them. We don't therefore have a lot of detail to sit behind them.
So on what basis will you prioritise without that information?
That's the purpose of the work that we're doing with Cambridge Econometrics. So we have a list of schemes, as I say, none of which have been developed, because to actually develop those schemes to a point of having detailed options available would cost several millions of pounds, which as yet is not available. So they are concepts, and what our consultants are doing is trying to link those concepts, so what we understand those schemes will deliver in terms of connectivity and journey time reliability, for example, with areas of growth in terms of housing and areas of growth in terms of employment, and through that process to identify which of the transport schemes are likely to give the greatest benefits in terms of ability to grow the economy through the growth of jobs and through the growth of houses. So that's the piece of work that's being undertaken at the moment. But just to pick any one of those schemes, for example, we have in the list, and I'm not saying this will be in the first 5 years, but we have in the list Milton Road as a key corridor that needs to be addressed. What we don't have at this moment in time are any details, because we have to go through a full engagement process and consultation. So we couldn't tell you whether it will be bus lanes along a particular length of Milton Road or any other particular solution, because we actually need to start the process of scheme development. So it's very much conceptual ideas about schemes and the general benefits they will have, and that is the only information that will be available up until, well, beyond January, when the decision is taken for which schemes we then do develop.
I suppose what I'm trying to get at, right, are this prioritisation January going to be made on the basis of some quantitative estimates for economic benefit, or are you going to be on the basis of what looks politically easiest to sell in the different constituencies? I mean, I'm just trying to get a sense of what is the nature of the decision-making process. Because I don't understand.
Yeah.
But maybe I can answer the first part of that, which is the information that we as officers will bring to members of this board, is the quantitative side of that. And we will make recommendations based upon the relative economic benefits of the schemes. Clearly it's for members of this board to decide how they then deal with that quantitative assessment.
Because that is the crucial point, isn't it? That we've got to make sure that it is done on the economic benefit, because this is supposed to be for delivering growth and housing, and we've got to avoid falling into the trap of doing schemes that are nice to do, which probably won't deliver enough when they come to do the audit. Is that? Yeah. Who's next?
Lewis. Chair, on the issue of the quantity of staffing and the consultancy budget, can we get a good element of public reporting on that as part of the report in January? Well, because clearly we can't say which schemes are going to cost which amounts of money, but presumably you will be able to say, Graham, how many staff you're going to need to take on, and roughly what the consultancy budget is going to be.
Chair, through you, and I think we could certainly have an indication of that in the way that the team of people who are likely to be leading on this work, the way they work at the moment is they are entirely capital funded. So at the moment they're based at the County Council, they're entirely capital funded, and they charge all of their time to individual schemes. And so the size of that team goes up and down depending upon the size of the capital programme. And so if the capital programme increases, then for certain peaks of work we will need to staff up the team, and then when the workload dips down it will fall down. So we can give a broad indication of numbers. It's probably better to give an indication of the likely, as you say, consultancy spend, because much of the technical work will be done out of house. So we can give an indication of both of those things, and it will vary over time.
And then, Chair, to get, well, when we've got effectively the way that I understand it's going to pan out, is obviously going to be managing it project by project. So you'll have, if you like, an overview, which won't be a precise figure, but then we should be able to get for each project or each work stream a figure of what the staffing element is, what the communication element is for each of those when they're then defined.
Yes, through your chair, that's correct, and most of the people involved will be working on several projects, so we won't have defined people for defined projects, but we will be able to say our estimate of person hours and cost and consultancy time, and clearly once the project is completed we will be able to say actually what the project did cost, because all of that time will be recorded throughout the process.
And I probably appreciate the need to crack on, so
I think you know what you're doing over the Christmas holidays, don't you?
Yes.
Steve?
Yeah, I've got sort of two areas I want to comment on. The first one is very much what we've been discussing about the quantitative evidence and what's coming to us in January. Now, I understood that we wouldn't have the final figures because we won't have a scheme worked out fully, but we will basically have an economic bang for your buck kind of figure for each and every scheme. Now, because they are based on concepts, as you go through working them up, let's say for £100 million we get 10 schemes, so you have 1 to 10. You have the no-brainer at the top that's got such a fantastic bang for your buck, it will never go wrong. But those at 8, 9 and 10 are slightly ahead of numbers 11, 12 and 13. But once you've got the concept ironed out, and it wasn't quite what we thought, I wouldn't like to see them set in stone, even if we've got a bit of money invested in them, when it looks likely that some of the schemes 11, 12, 13 should be able to overtake them. So, I think we've got to build that into our programme and look at it that way. A little bit concerned about the moving in schemes in and out. If we think they're not going right, that's got to be valuable to us. A little bit worried just in the costings of converting the capital in revenue, totally fine with that. But the use of consultants, I think we need to be clear, we need specialised consultants where it's a specialised area. But we've got 5 years worth of work here, so the vast majority should actually be resourced through permanent resource rather than having people on 5-year consultancy fees. But I'm sure you'll handle that anyway. I want to touch on the table on page 6, the timescales. And if we take possibly the executive board delivery scheme, a cumulative time frame on that is 15 to 26 months. Right? And I understand how it's been worked up. Now we have to deliver in order to achieve triggers the biggest bang for a buck. There's 2 ways of doing it. That's delivering the best schemes, but also if we can shave 11 months off a project, that's almost a year more of bang for a buck. So my first question would be, if things are playable from 15 to 26 months, we should set a limit of 15 months and reverse engineer that for any project and say we have to hit that timescale. You know, that we have to pre-plan from day one how we're going to get the first shovel in the ground in a 15-month term. But my second question would be, can we change that 15 months? Can we get it any lower? Is there any way for any of the projects, not any of the projects, but all the projects, to dip in under that 15? There's a mention in here that depending on resource, we may, not get things off the ground. Well, if the resource is coming from capital funding, and we say, well, look, we can get that a month or 2 months earlier because we can do it with a little bit more resource there, then that's the very first challenge should be, what is the smallest timescale we can have a shovel in the ground?
If I can just come back on a couple of points. The point Councillor Count raised about managing resources effectively in consultants. Clearly we would do that, and there are certain, as you say, specialist task modelling particularly that we don't do in-house. If it's sort of bulk project management or things that, as you say, with a 5-year programme, it's more often than not cheaper for us to employ rather than to take on consultants, so we certainly seek to do that. In terms of things being set in stone, I absolutely agree with that. Our intention is for this board in January is to have a complete ranked list of schemes. We will overlay onto that list of schemes deliverability, so some of the schemes simply aren't deliverable within 5 years, so there would be no point in aiming to achieve something that's not possible. So the very large schemes, given the time it takes to develop and consult and so on, it's not possible. So we will then have a subset of schemes that are both deliverable but also ranked from top to bottom in terms of their economic benefit. Certainly the way I think it will go forward is that we will try to develop as many of those schemes as possible, because in reality there should be more than £100 million available in the first 5 years, because not only do we have the City Deal money, but there's also Section 106, SIL revenues and so on that will come in. And so, we actually need to identify how far down the list, and also, if we build up a bank of schemes of more than 100 million, it does allow things to move in and out. So I think it's going to be quite fluid, but what we don't want to do is to find ourselves in a position of delaying implementation because we haven't actually got enough of a bank of schemes ready to go. So it's going to be a bit of a process to make sure we don't spend or waste too much money on unnecessary scheme development, but equally that we have enough schemes ready to go whenever we have money. Just on the final points, I would love to say that we would bring the schemes down to 15 months and less, but the reality, certainly of the more difficult schemes, is that they, with the necessary consultation exercises and design and so on, they just take quite a long time. And I would give us an example. The Chesterton Abbey cycle bridge that we're developing between where the new science park station will be, in total that scheme would have taken at least 2 years to go through its initial conceptual design, 2 or 3 stages of consultation, all of which are necessary and appropriate. So I'm not saying that we should cut corners, but it's just that those processes do take quite a while. I think what we would expect is members of this board to be challenging us and pushing us very hard to deliver as quickly as possible, so you're quite right. But I wouldn't want to give you the impression that we can just squeeze that timetable down to a very short period of time, but we will certainly seek to do it as quickly as possible. And I think the final point about resources, absolutely right. We don't want to come back to you and say we haven't delivered because we haven't been able to secure the resource. That's not an acceptable position, bearing in mind, as you say, we have an ongoing stream of revenue.
I think it's sort of summed up, we've got to be flexible and fast on our feet. Anybody else? We've got some recommendations. We've got to agree the recommendations, I suppose, have we? Yeah. Yeah. Agreed? Agreed? Skills, number 7, verbal. Graham again?
Let's begin, yeah. I think this will be a much shorter item. So I reported to the last of these meetings that discussions were ongoing with the Skills Funding Agency around what the skills offer could be. I've had a meeting, and there is another meeting planned, albeit now after Christmas, with the Skills Funding Agency senior local person and the biz representative to refine how we can most effectively influence the skills agenda. So that's still work going, but I would certainly hope that for the next one of these meetings we will have a definitive position that we will be able to bring in a proper paper for hopefully agreed by most of this board.
Any questions? Number 8, Joint Assembly Co-operative Members. This is pages 9 and 10.
This is just a technicality really. It's to endorse the membership of the Joint Assembly, the representatives from the LEC and the university. What would normally happen is that the way that the terms of reference are written, the Executive Board would endorse the co-option of those members onto the Assembly, but the Joint Assembly would be meeting first prior to the Executive Board in January. So the recommendation today is for the Shadow Board to endorse the nominations that have been received from the LEC and the university, and for the Executive Board in January, its first formal meeting, to formally endorse those appointments. So that's the recommendation for you today. That makes sense.
So we've got the, under number 2, we've got the Greater Cambridge, Greater Peterborough LEP. Their recommendation is Sir Michael Marshall, Claire Ruskin and Andy Williams. Are we agreed on that?
Absolutely. In fact, my comment would be I'm very glad to see such high-profile people joining us.
No, it's good that there's going to be a meeting before Christmas, because that will able to catch up for a variety of initiatives. So they're ready. It should be in January.
I think it's gratifying that we're getting people with this sort of calibre. University of Cambridge, Anne Constantine, Cambridge Regional College, Jane Ramsey, Health Groups, and Helen Valentine and Bea Ruskin. Again, are we agreed? Yeah. Thank you. Do we need to do anything else on that?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Number 9, update on other work streams, pages 11 and 12. Who's this? Okay. So it looks like Andrew's the first one off.
Yeah, well, obviously we've had the 3 stakeholder briefings so far, and the last one tonight, and there's another one being arranged for MPs and leaders of other districts and their opposition league members. And the county communications team will be working up a website as well to have all of the city deal information in one place, which will be helpful for the public and other stakeholders to kind of be able to find all things. So that's good news.
Okay. The man with the money, finance, Chris.
Thanks, Jane. Well, at the moment I don't have any money, so it's an interesting instruction. I would have hoped to have brought a paper to this meeting, but given the governance process within each individual authority, I thought it was more appropriate to actually bring it to the next meeting. I think we have now got resolution on the contribution levels from the 3 local authorities, so that issue has now been clarified. So it can go through the budget papers of the respective authorities in the first instance, and then come back to the board in January. I'm getting the check.
Governance framework, Andrew.
Yep, it's been through the committees and cabinets in the three councils and has been endorsed by the City Council and by South Cambridgeshire District Council, I think on one amendment, South Cambridgeshire. Going to County Council, full council meeting next Wednesday, Tuesday the 16th. So if the County Council endorses it, then the business will be done and the governance arrangement, the joint committee and assembly will be in place, ready to work in January.
No, I think we don't. I mean, I think if you wanted to, you could. Because this is a local authority joint committee that's been created, particularly the executive board and the advisory, and it's an advisory committee. They're both statutory committees within the Local Government Act framework, so they need the three local authorities to put them into place. So those are the processes that are being completed next week. So it doesn't require the university or level something from that perspective. I think it's worth just noting, isn't it, that the minor amendment that Andrew referred to, depending on what the County Council do with that next week, will either require the item to come back to South Cambridgeshire to reconsider, or to go to the City Council to reconsider, depending on whether the County Council accept or reject the South Cambridgeshire amendment or not. And that stuff just needs to be squared off at that particular process. But we don't view it as critical to the operation of the board in practical terms. So I think our advice is that we'll be able to proceed in January despite that amendment.
Yes, if I may, Chair. Just on that note, I believe it's a minor amendment being put forward to a certain extent the County Council as well. And I can't say what will happen to that until we get to the vote. It does strike me as somewhat perverse that we could end up batting around minor amendments year after year as they dot round the three councils. So hopefully we'll be able to, but I don't think that would be a material thing either, but hopefully we'll get to a solid set of rules in the very near future.
Anything else? No? Housing, Alex?
Yes, on the first one, I apologise, we haven't got as far forward as I wanted to at this stage, but we're very close to finalising some of the governance arrangements for the joint venture, and I hope to be able to report to that to the next board. Certainly I'm planning to get some work done on that before Christmas. What I am pleased to note is that we've now appointed Jill Anderton to the role of leading on the housing development role across the Greater Cambridge area, and we're hoping we're going to be able to tie that in very closely with the City Council's housing work as well. Jill, although she currently works for this council, has got a lot of experience working on housing development schemes for housing associations. So she comes with a wealth of experience in this area, and we're looking forward to bringing those forward. So we've got around 16 sites now that we're working with the County Council as a pipeline. I think you've already announced the first one of those schemes that we'll be looking forward to bring forward to planning early in the new year, and Jill will be working through with the local communities and parish councils on that pipeline as soon and as quickly as we can.
I think that's good because, you know, with the Assembly coming forward, the first executive board coming forward, and at long last we can say to people something is actually happening, and here it is on the ground that, you know, the first of the exception sites coming forward. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks to South Cambridge for taking the lead. We're obviously, as we've had in the informal meetings, we're really keen to work with you on this agenda. We'll figure in our budgets next year, and I'm sure we'll figure in yours, both the HRA and the general fund budgets.
Providing affordable housing has got to be one of the best things we can do. Investment programme? Graham, you've had a rest, you can go back in there.
Well, I think that was actually points that have been covered by the substantive debate on the agenda.
The payment by results mechanism.
We've continued to have meetings and discussions with Cabinet Office servants, and Graham Alex and I went to have a meeting with Cabinet Office a couple of weeks ago. Cabinet Office are now talking to their Treasury counterparts and colleagues. I expect them to be having meetings in the next week or two, which we will look forward to hearing feedback from, and hope that we have an inclusive outcome soon.
Okay. Skills?
Again, I think covered on my previous briefing.
Strategic planning?
Strategic planning, yes. This is about how we bring, principally how we bring the transport planning and land use planning items together. Officers from the three councils have had a couple of meetings. There's still some further work to be done, so there's nothing specific to report at the moment, but in the fullness of time we will bring a paper forward on recommendations with nothing specific at the moment.
Okay. Nothing on that before we move on? Now, date on the work streams.
Forward plan now.
Forward plan.
Yeah. Item 10.
10, 13, pages 13 and 14.
So, Chairman, we've set out the draft items that will come to both the Assembly and the Executive Board in January, and then proposed potential meetings in the early part of the new year, Chairman. So really they're there for comment and any other items that you want to see come to either of those. I think we've already heard a proposal from Chris to bring resources paper forward towards our next meeting.
The location, that's going to be decided afterwards, is it?
Chairman, as I understand it, the Assembly meeting will be here. I don't know about the board meeting yet.
So that's SCDC.
Yeah.
Just to mention actually as well, the date is the 12th of January, Assembly, not the 13th.
Did everybody hear that? It's changed to the 12th, not the 13th. And that's going to be here.
It's here, yes. The Executive Board, the date will be confirmed in due course, so we just need to speak to more members to just make sure that the majority of you can attend on the most convenient day. So I'll confirm those details in due course.
And is it the intention, members, that we rotate and meet at different places each time?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Can we diarise as early as possible a full year's calendar? Because I really struggle with, trying to arrange things and stay there long.
I think that would be better. So, do we need to decide where the executive board's going to meet, or do you want to wait until the date's set?
I think there's such pressure on meeting rooms, Chairman. It does vary between what dates selected as to what meeting rooms are available in which venues.
Right. Okay.
If you're happy to leave it in Graham's hands, I'm sure we'll find the right venue.
Just meet, if it's a nice day, you can always meet outside. Not in January, no. And then the future meeting dates are just as suggestions at the moment, but obviously, if we need an extra meeting date, if anything kick-started or things like that, then of course we can put another one in, can't we? Okay, thank you. Public questions. Are there any questions from the public? Right. Thank you very much for your attendance. I would just say once again, I've said it before, but I think we are all very appreciative of the officers, because this work is being done in addition to your day jobs. You're sort of doing it evenings instead of playing snooker or whatever else. So I think we are very appreciative, and I would like to say once again, thank you very much for doing it.
Thank you.